No one anticipated this. Not the front office of the Indiana Fever. Not the veterans of the WNBA. Not even the throngs of people singing her name in the arena. However, people with direct knowledge of the matter claim that Caitlin Clark has reached her breaking point. The entire franchise is on edge due to what she allegedly informed the corporation behind closed doors. It's not about a single poor game. This has nothing to do with rookie adjustments. This has to do with direction, control, power, and whether or not what insiders are murmuring is accurate. It's possible that their brightest star just gave the Fever an unexpected ultimatum. Because Caitlin Clark apparently lay out a blueprint, a demand, a line in the sand, and a clear message rather than merely voicing worries. I won't stay if we're not serious about winning. Now take a moment to stop. We are discussing the most captivating rookie the WNBA has seen in a long time. The next generation of the league is represented by the player that broke viewership records. And you're suggesting that she may be tired already? Something took place. Behind the scenes, something. Clark was compelled to reveal exactly what the Indiana Fever needed to do right away in order to avoid losing the player on whom they had built their whole team. What makes this even more explosive? It doesn't sit well with some veterans. And the following spill simply made matters worse. Because this is no longer solely a team problem. It's a league moment. It will soon get unpleasant. And believe me when I say that it quickly becomes clear why this moment feels so intense. You must comprehend how we arrived at this point. Because it took time for this to happen. Music, the pressure was oppressive from the moment Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA. Even before she unpacked her bags in Indiana, cameras were following her. Sales of tickets surged. TV schedules across the country were rearranged. Weeks in advance, tickets in once-empty arenas were suddenly sold out. Additionally, the Indiana Fever were picking a movement rather than just a player. However, this is the bit that no one discusses. When she got there, the Fever weren't particularly strong. This team has been rebuilding, changing systems, switching coaches, and trying to figure out who they are. They had bits that showed promise. Indeed. Young talent, music, athletic potential, brief moments of camaraderie, but consistency, leadership, and a clear winning culture are still being developed. Expectations didn't simply rise when Clark entered, they skyrocketed. All of a sudden, every loss was more than just a loss. A referendum was held. Every turnover, every argument, every missed defensive rotation, and every hot topic. And something subtle started to change within that locker room. Two very distinct energy collided, according to people close to the team. On the one hand, Caitlin Clark is a very competitive, meticulous, and mediocrity-averse athlete whose entire persona is based on outworking, outshooting, and outliving everyone in her way. Conversely, a squad that is still learning how to win at the professional level. This is when things start to get interesting. Clark was tactful early in the season, grinning during interviews, saying the appropriate things, and discussing having faith in the process. However, insiders claim that she was posing difficult questions behind the scenes. This offensive spacing, why are we settling for it? After rebounds, why don't we increase the tempo? Why do we tolerate defensive mistakes without taking responsibility for them? Additionally, one team insider claims that everything changed during a private filming session. If this is the standard, we're not serious, Clark reportedly replied coolly after pausing the video and rewinding a defensive possession. Not because she shouted, but rather because she didn't. The room fell silent. Some veterans reportedly began whispering at that point. Is she going too far? As a rookie, is she attempting to lead the team? Does she still consider this to be college? Here's what people overlook though. Clark didn't show up softly. She was the most talked about female basketball player when she first came. She has national endorsements, sponsors, and pundits referring to her as the league's future. Leverage follows that spotlight, and leverage modifies dynamics. The Fever front office, meanwhile, was under strain. Ownership desired advancement. Attendance was soaring, but the performance needed to live up to the expectations. The coaching staff eventually found themselves in a precarious situation. Do you modify the system to make the most of Clark's advantages? Or do you preserve the equilibrium of the locker room? Because this is the unpleasant reality. Resentment may inadvertently seep in when one player takes center stage. Let's now discuss the pivotal moment. Indiana's offensive rhythm appeared jumbled for a period of games. On some nights, defenses dared others to intervene, but on others, they didn't. Clark was being violently trapped, doubling beyond the arc. Frustration began to manifest in body language, extended timeouts, quiet bench stares, and hands on hips following missed rotations rather than in outbursts in public. Comment sections swelled, fans took note, and videos went viral. Why isn't the coaching staff making adjustments built appropriately around her? This is not something she can do by herself. However, a difficult defeat that experts say was preventable preceded the genuine change. Someone connected to the company claims that Clark asked for a private meeting with team leadership to discuss what needs to change rather than to voice complaints. We are discussing unambiguous defensive accountability, offensive framework, rotational consistency, and above all, urgency. One purported statement from that gathering. I'm not wired that way, but it's okay if we're simply competing. Give that some thought. She made it apparent that she wouldn't waste years in a passive reconstruction, even though she didn't declare she was leaving. At that point, the story began to take shape internally rather than externally. Is Caitlin Clark pressing too quickly or too hard, or is she revealing what the Fever needs to face if they want to compete? This isn't about ego, so don't misunderstand. It has to do with trajectory. Clark didn't settle for mediocrity after setting records her entire career. She wasn't drafted by the Fever merely to sell tickets, either. This was meant to be a collaboration and a change. But what happens if the timelines don't coincide? When a competitor from a different generation requests acceleration, what happens? Now, that tension is simmering. Additionally, there are rumors circulating within the league that other teams are keeping a close eye on Indiana because if they don't share Clark's vision, someone else will soon. And it was after practice that this whole situation became unavoidable. Additionally, it leaked even though it wasn't meant to be public. And the conversation instantly shifted after fans saw it. Everything changed at this point. Not at a post-game news conference, not in a nationally televised game, and not even in a defeat. There were no cameras, only players, coaches, and the tension that had been subtly building for weeks when it happened during practice. The Fever were conducting late-game situational exercises, according to many team-related sources. 40 seconds remain, down 3. A defensive stop is required. The kind of representatives that, at crucial situations, define your identity. And that's when it took place. A missing rotation was pointed out by Clark. Sharp once more, without being emotional or yelling. Another breakdown, another lost contact, and the possession reset. And this is why we're losing close games, Clark reportedly stated after clapping once. Then there was silence. It's not just one person, one veteran apparently replied. Stop now, because it was more than a play. That has to do with leadership. Immediately, energy changed. According to sources, the gym felt divided. Half of the guys were defensive, and the other half were locked in. This is where things go really bad. Despite the coaching staff's attempts to defuse the situation, Clark refused to back down. According to reports, she went to the whiteboard, made space modifications, and then said something that shocked everyone in the room. We're losing time if we don't resolve this. It was that line that began to circulate. A version of it was leaked by the following morning. Not formally, but sufficiently close. WNBA Twitter went crazy. The locker room is being taken over by Clark. Veterans are being called out by rookies. Fever culture was revealed, and all of a sudden, what was meant to be internal growth became a topic of public discussion. However, the true explosion didn't happen for 48 hours. Indiana played a nationally televised game with high viewership, filled arenas, cameras everywhere, aggressive long threes, a fast tempo, and noisy defense. However, every time the Fever gained momentum, something went wrong, such as a turnover or missed assistance. Late change. And following a defensive misunderstanding, Clark was seen on camera pointing toward the bench late in the fourth quarter when the team was down 5. Intense, but not yelling. In a matter of minutes, the video went viral. Lip-reading threads, slow-motion replays, and frame-by-frame analysis of music. Caitlin Clark has had enough, one sports account said as the caption. The following day, are you frustrated with the team's direction? We all have to decide how serious we are, Clark stated after pausing and grinning a little. Because it wasn't a rejection, That response exploded. It wasn't consoling. It was difficult. Supporters started thinking that Clark was communicating with the front office as well as his players. The first twist then appeared. According to a reputable league insider, Clark and team leadership had several strategic discussions regarding roster construction and system modifications. Let's be clear now. It's common for players to advocate for changes, but the way this was presented made it sound like leverage. The insider implied that Clark had stressed the need to establish a championship infrastructure as quickly as possible. And the term infrastructure was scrutinized everywhere. Was she doubting the urgency of coaching roster depth management? Other players were being questioned about it in the meantime. "We're all trying to figure things out," a cautious teammate remarked. "It's a process." "Notice something," said another. Her remarks were not directly supported by anyone, and that silence spoke a lot. This is when it becomes even more severe, though. According to sources, team leadership called another private meeting following the widely shared bench incident. According to reports, Clark reaffirmed three important themes. The offensive identity needs to be quicker and more obvious. It is impossible for defensive accountability to be voluntary. Expectations must be realistic if the objective is not to compete far into the playoffs in the near future. The pressure point is that final one. Because a franchise sells optimism when they select a generational star. However, hope has a time limit. Additionally, rumors circulating throughout the league claim that Clark stated unequivocally that she does not envision herself enduring never-ending rounds of rebuilding. Now, before anyone makes snap judgments, there are no written trade demands or ultimatums. However, insiders claim that the tone shifted. In Indiana, "Better move quickly," a league executive allegedly warned a colleague. Stars don't always have patience. After that comment was leaked, practice was no longer the topic of discussion. It was about future leverage because what will happen when contract discussions inevitably arise if Indiana is unable to match her competitive timeline? Fans began making connections. Will pressure tactics start now? Is she setting herself up? Is she simply asking for perfection? Then came the time when everything was doused with gasoline. Additionally, a brief video from practice that was taken from the stands by an unauthorized person appeared online. It featured Clark conducting an exercise, vocally moving teammates, and finishing each repetition with championship behaviors. Nothing outlandish, but when the caption said, "Clark basically coaching the team," the story took off. Her leadership was commended by several. She was criticized by some of going too far. Additionally, because leadership changes are rarely seamless, particularly when they take place in public, tension is said to have increased inside the locker room. And just as everyone assumed that this had to do with team culture, another layer surfaced. A reliable sports radio broadcaster claims that Clark's camp has discreetly stated that she wants clarification regarding the team's long-term goals, including player development commitments and free agency strategy. That is strategy, not insurrection. However, it appeared to be pressure in the public eye. This is the first real twist. According to reports, a rival CEO made a casual approach to assess Indiana's level of confidence in retaining Clark in the long run. Just curiosity, no offer, no manipulation. Music, and the panic posts began as soon as that whisper reached social media. Keep her safe at all costs. The front desk needs to take care of this. Follow her instructions. The Fever is currently in a precarious situation. If you move too forcefully, it appears like one person is in charge. You run the danger of losing momentum and possibly trust if you move too slowly. Furthermore, Clark hasn't publicly blown up despite everything. She hasn't made any demands. However, the league has taken note because this is no longer simply about the Indiana Fever. Her words, her intensity, and her body language have said enough. This concerns the consequences of a generational rival's refusal to compromise. The following revelation, however, caught everyone off guard. Because a comment made by someone within the organization at the height of the discussion completely changed the course of the story. The story exploded because the comment that surfaced wasn't from a random blogger, just when it seemed like it couldn't get any louder. It was not intended to be made public and originated from someone within the Indiana Fever Group. Several media insiders claim that a member of the Fever's extended staff was overheard answering a question regarding Caitlin Clark's leadership intensity during a private sponsor event that was off-camera, casual, and easygoing. "She's passionate, but we're still a team," the employee allegedly remarked. This is no longer college. That's all. Just one phrase. However, the internet went crazy when it leaked since, all of a sudden, this had nothing to do with system adjustments. It had nothing to do with the urgency of competition. It has to do with control. Two participants purportedly corroborated the comment to a sports journalist, but the video was not captured. After hearing some internal opposition to Clark's attempts to impose his control, the journalist tweeted incoherently, "Indiana's dynamic brewing is fascinating." In a matter of hours, that tweet had over 3 million views. She's raising the bar, Team Clark. Forget about it. The team allowed the process to proceed. The story exploded overnight, and rookies don't control culture. Then the second twist appeared, and it completely altered the situation. Days later, Clark was questioned about acclimating to the workplace in a nationally aired interview. "I know who I am as a competitor," she remarked quietly after pausing. "I won't apologize for my desire for more." That sentence was often used. Analysts, podcasts, debating panels, and sports programs started posing a new query. Is Indiana ready to face an alpha competitor from a different generation? Because this is the truth that no one wanted to express aloud. The timeline of the franchise has drastically changed due to Clark's arrival. Sales of tickets increased dramatically. Sales of merchandise surged. Music, attention across the country increased. However, performance is still improving. Furthermore, music growth and urgency seldom advance at the same rate in professional sports. This is when things became even more intense. According to a well-known sports radio presenter, Clark's camp has stressed the need to add veteran playoff-caliber players as quickly as possible during internal planning sessions. Once more, a direction rather than a demand. And that insight was like gasoline on fire. All of a sudden, leadership conflict wasn't the only topic in the news. They have to do with building rosters. Is Indiana moving too slowly to take advantage of Clark's window? Will chips be pushed in early by the Fever? Then there was a small but significant event. "We're close, but close doesn't matter in this league," Clark stated during a press conference following a close defeat. Her tone was straightforward, concentrated, and devoid of a smile. And a tidal wave was set off by that clip. The reason for this is that it sounded more like a warning than encouragement. League insiders, meanwhile, started to murmur something much more significant. It appears that rival franchises are keeping a close eye on Indiana's internal environment, not to meddle but to comprehend long-term stability. Additionally, one boss is said to have set off the record. "You will either immediately align or someone else will if you have a player like that. Now stop, since that's observation, not manipulation." Fans, however, missed the subtlety. They heard a threat. Speculation about future negotiations, leverage, and stance erupted in social media threads. Was Clark setting the stage? Was she pressuring the evolution of the organization? Or was she just asking for perfection? One team source claims that top leadership organized a strategy meeting inside the Fever facility with the express purpose of addressing alignment of the competitive vision. Translation: they are aware of the risks. Because this is the startling revelation that really changed everything. Sources suggest that Clark is not alone despite all the tension storylines. Her demand for quicker accountability and more transparent procedures is allegedly supported by a number of younger players. The equation is altered as a result. This isn't a rookie versus veteran match. Evolution is at odds with comfort. And when competitive standards grow, they don't quietly retreat, making it a much riskier dynamic. Please share your thoughts in the comment section, subscribe, and enable all notifications so you don't miss anything. We'll see you in the next one after you click the video on the screen.